CAI's website. Our webinar is brought to you today by LiftMaster. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Jill Coulter is a full-time professional mediator with over 25 years' experience in the legal field, a Florida Supreme Court certified circuit civil and appellate mediator. Ms. Coulter is the founder of Resolve Mediation, Inc., specializing in community association disputes. As a licensed provider for the Department of Business and Professional Regulation in the state of Florida and a course provider approved by the Community Association Managers International Certification Board, Jill conducts courses educating and training the art and skills to better effectively communicate and negotiate designed for CAMs, vendors, and board members. We'll start with a poll. Question 1. With whom do you find you are having difficulty with? Property manager, resident, board member, combination of the above. Question 2. What is the turnout attendance of residents at your annual meeting? Less than 25%, 25 to 50, or over 55%? Question 3. Do you believe that residents in your community understand the role of the board versus that of the property manager? And question 4, for property managers, do you find your direct supervisor difficult to work with? Often, rarely, or never? In question 1, it looks like the vast majority of our attendees are having problems with residents, or a combination. Looks like the turnout of attendance of residents at the annual meeting is not good, usually less than 25%. And most people think that the residents of the community don't understand the difference of that between the board and the property manager, and property managers have an overall good experience with their direct supervisor. And now, Jill, the audience is yours.
Well, thanks so much, Shari, and hello and welcome, everyone. I find that your responses to those poll questions are absolutely amazing. And of course, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that the majority of people listening today are property managers, since no one seems to have any problem with their property manager. That being said, let's open up the lines of communication. And I know we're focusing on dealing with difficult people here today, but we do have to discuss some foundations that lead us to the tools that you're going to have in your toolbox at the end of this brief webinar, so you can better effectively communicate with your residents and business partners, and also learn how to diffuse those angry fires that people tend to have when they're coming at you. You know, it's funny. Oftentimes when I present this live in person with people, the property managers joke that they're the ones that are difficult, but I do find that highly unlikely. I did want to share with you that the foundation that I'm going to be speaking about today comes down to two important aspects in interpersonal communications. The first one being the behavior style, and the second being the communication skill sets. So we know what behavior is, and for time and millennium, philosophers and great thinkers have been pondering and figuring out behavior. And even up until the earliest 20th century, behavior has come down to 4 different types. Now I'm going to ask you, and I know you cannot answer me, you can put it in the everyone chat if you'd like, but I'm wondering if anyone's familiar with the DISC concept or the DISC assessment. Perhaps with your management company, you've gone ahead and had a DISC assessment. Let me just briefly go over that, so for those of you who are unaware of what it is, I can make you aware. And this is just a broad introduction to DISC. DISC essentially taps into and tests what your reactions are to certain situations. So if you're putting your team together, your management team, or you're looking to place your managers with communities. You might want to consider what their personalities are like. Now, we're not focusing so much on personalities as we are on behavior. So let me jump into this and explain to you what DISC is the acronym for, which is set right here on the screen. D is for dominance, I is for influence, S is for submission, and C is compliance. Now, different companies might use the acronym differently, but for the purpose of this webinar today, we're going to go with these 4 words. So now I do want to stress before I do jump in here that people in general are not made up of just one behavior type. And what do I mean by that? When you're in your office or you're in your community, you're the property manager. Your behavior might be more dominant than, let's say, when you go home to your family or you're out having a cocktail with your friends. Your behaviors are different. Also, I want to stress that the behavior is not right or wrong. The behaviors blend dependent upon the situation. And yes, we might have some people that are constantly difficult to work with, but their behavior when they're with their loved ones might not be the same as when they're working with you. So keep that in mind as we go through the behavior types. And I want to remind you, we're building the foundation to get to those tools to dealing with difficult people. So stay with me on this. You're going to learn a little something here today. Let's move on to our dominant behavior. And I've used the lion here, as you can see on this screen, as the dominant behavior. You can use anything you want. I'm just using the lion as a little mnemonic device that you could put into your head so when you see the lion coming at you, you know who you're dealing with. The lion is the person who knows what they want when they want it. They get things done. We have a majority of property managers on this call today, and I'm sure the majority, if not all of you, have a dominant or play a dominant role because you're in charge. You're making it happen. You're getting whatever the issue is done. But let's go to board members and residents. And I saw in the poll question, this is something that we really need to address. Typically, I find when I'm in the live seminar, when I ask the property managers, do you think your board president is, let's say, dominant, a lion? And the majority of the hands do go up. And because your board presidents, they're the ones making it happen alongside of you, hopefully. They are not afraid to state what it is they want. They roar. They're the king of the jungle. But what they don't like is when you question what it is they want. What they do like is just like we learn in school or with our parents or with our coworkers. What they like is that if you have a question about a decision they're making, you want to come to them with a thoughtful alternative. Never come to a person with a problem with no answer. Think about that. And when you're dealing with the dominant behavior, that's what you need in your back pocket to make that interaction more successful. So this is your lion. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on now to our influencer. The influencer is the person that when you walk into the room, they smile, they extend their hand to you, they shake your hand. I am an influencer, and you're going to hear me use the terms high D, high I, low D. This means that high I meaning influential. So the way I'm speaking to you, or when I walk into the CAI social at my Gold Coast chapter, anyone that I don't know, and of course anyone I do know, I go in there and I extend my hand. Hello, I'm Jill Coulter with Resolve Mediation, and you are? And this way I get to know these people, and those influencers are the ones that are going to introduce you to someone else. Oh, you're with a pool maintenance company. That's fantastic. Have you met Jane Doe? She's with a chemical company. So these are ways influencers work. The influencer likes to be liked. The influencer is the person on your board or the person in your neighborhood who can talk to that difficult person because they get along. They have no worries. They're there to assist you. In board meetings, the influencer is the person who is going to show someone the side of an opinion that someone else can't see. They adapt, like our little chameleon I have here. The chameleon sitting on a green branch, the chameleon is green, but when the chameleon jumps off into the dirt, the chameleon takes on the color of that dirt. So this is our influencer. An influencer is someone, think about this as I'm speaking to you. The people on the board, the people that you work with, the residents. Make a little note for me so that when we get to the question period, you can ask a question, hey Jill, I've got this type of person. Is this the one I want to send to the Lion to have this discussion? This is your influencer. The influencer typically sees outside of the box as well. They see things that wouldn't normally cross your mind. Unlike the simple chemical company with the pool maintenance company, other business partners that you can work with that you would never think would work together successfully in your community. So we've got our dominant lion, we have our influencer, the chameleon, and now we're going to move on to our little lamb. See that little lamb? He looks so cute and fuzzy. What does a little lamb do? A little lamb walks through the community, or in this case, on the farm, following everybody. The little lamb is soft and loyal, but this is the person that you're not going to get to open up their mouth. They are not going to be the one, if you're trying to state your purpose, if you turn to the person whose behavior is like a lamb, they don't think their voice needs to be heard. They're not the one who's going to help you the same way the influencer is. The lamb is also the person that you want to avoid from the lion, because the lion will roar and roll over that little lamb and eat that little lamb alive, so to speak. So when you're looking at the boards that you're working with, or these residents that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, or even the interpersonal communications you have with your business partners, think of them and think of how you treat them and work with them. Lambs will be the ones that you will bowl over. You don't want to sick your lion on your lamb. Now, we're going to move on to the owl, who I've used here to illustrate compliance. The owl is your critical thinker. I like to equate sometimes when I deliver this that when you have your community association attorneys, and I'm sure the majority of people on here today do work with community association law firms, the owl is the person in that law firm that when you're perusing contracts with your business partners, the owl is the one that's going to read that contract and know it. The owl is the person on your board that you want to have there, or you want to be that owl, because I'm sure whenever your residents come to you with an issue, you have to know what your governing documents and bylaws say. You should know these backwards and forwards and be able to explain these things to them. So I'm sure in your day-to-day work, especially when you're producing notices for violations, you know the rules, and therefore you put them into those notices. And when your resident comes back at you and says, hey, what do you mean I can't, wear a pink polka dot bikini by the pool? That's not a rule, and you can cite that rule. These are your critical thinkers. Your critical thinker is a good partner for your lion. And why is that? The lion likes to get things done the right way. The critical thinker is the person that is going to do it the right way. Your lamb might vacillate back and forth versus your critical thinker. And I just want to put this little vision in your head, just so as you're digesting all this information, you could think about this. Why did I choose the owl? The owl sits atop a perch and steady. You barely see them move except for maybe their head turns. And when they're looking for food, they keep their eye out, and as soon as they see it, they swoop down, grab their food that they found, and boom, right back up into that perch. They take their time. They don't rush. This is your owl. Now, I want to, if you don't mind, the question here that I'm seeing is about the board president making their own decisions and the rest of the consulting without consulting the rest of the board and disregards their ideas. You might say that he is a lion. As a manager, the question is, how can I encourage him to adopt a more cooperative approach without offending him and losing the contact? That is exactly what we're going to. So if your board president is bowling over your board, the tools that I'm offering you today will assist you in better understanding how to approach them. So the board president's the lion. Lion does not like to be questioned. The lion likes you to come at him with some sort of answer. The way to approach is logically and methodically, with conviction, not to be fighting with your board president, but to speak more with greater strength than you normally would if you were to deal with someone who's not as aggressive as this board president in Lexington, Kentucky. If they're not consulting, then the project manager has to sit down with them and have a discussion, or the board has to get together and have a discussion about opening lines of communication. And we're going to step into communication skills in just a moment. I believe at this point we take our questions. Any questions regarding behavior types?
We'll get to the question and answer in just a minute, I guess. Okay, but we do have some from email. Let's see, we can move forward. Oh, did you want to do a Q&A session now?
If anybody has questions about behavior type, that would be just fine. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the communication portion.
Okay, or if you want, I mean, if people don't have many questions on that, we can wait till the Q&A session and take them all.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So again, I just want to reiterate, as you're putting together your teams, oh, this is funny. Somebody just asked, Barbie Young asked, is someone who is a backstabber a chameleon? Well, in this sense, what we're talking about here is an influencer. That's the behavior type. I'm going to get to communication styles, Barbie, and you're going to see and we'll address that type of backstabber attitude. But more directly, they can be in that they're always going to be out there with you, talking to everyone. Could they be smiling at you and stabbing you in the back as you walk away? Absolutely. But you're never going to know who that backstabber is, who that chameleon is. And this goes hand in hand with what we're going to be going into with communication styles. So I just want to jump ahead just a few screens, and then I'm going to go back, and you're welcome. While we're talking about behavior, I am going to touch upon other cultures and diversity. And before I do that, I know people are questioning that they have different communities that are made up of people from all cultures and backgrounds, and I am going to impress upon that in a moment. Someone here asked me, in your opinion, do community association managers commonly exhibit one or more of the personality traits? And is one in particular style better suited for this role, or can they blend? Well, as I said on the outset of talking about behavior types, there is no one behavior type. The behaviors change dependent upon the circumstances or the situation they're in. And yes, they can go in and out and change those roles. We're all a blend of these behavior types. So when I went back to, or if I go back to discussing this DISC assessment, if you've taken one, or if your company has had you take one, they will ask, for example, if you're under duress, how do you handle a situation? And then they'll give you multiple choice questions. Same thing here with these types of behavior. It depends on the circumstance they're in. And the reason why I'm giving you this basic foundation, these tools, as we approach how we handle difficult people, is because this comes into play when you're trying to figure out these answers. So depending upon how a person is with you or how they're speaking with you or if they're roaring at you or if they come to you and they're just not sure what to do about something, this understanding behavior types is going to assist you in figuring out how you're going to interact with them. Patricia Forte here says, and I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, I think many managers are a combination of these traits just because of the nature of the business. And that's exactly what the managers have, which is a positive for you all, because you're dealing with so many other different types of behaviors and personalities that you have to be flexible enough to know them and recognize them. How am I going to speak with this person? What is going to be my best path towards success when I am dealing with them? Now, Christina has gone ahead, and I hope you don't mind me addressing these, but I think this is a good opportunity. What is the best way to deal with controlling, aggressive, condescending committee member? So my response to you, Christina, would be I don't know who that committee member is. I think that the best way to approach is to consider if they're the lion. When you've got a lion, you've got to roar a little bit more. And make sure that as you speak with them, you're clear and concise in what it is that they need. Responding with controlling aggressive attitude is not helpful at all. And I'm going to get that right into that now with styles of communication, and then we'll come right back to the questions. So let's jump from the behavior type to styles of communication. So we're all pretty familiar with communication styles, and we're going to go over them briefly just so you understand a little bit more about them. Oftentimes I find when we get into the nitty-gritty of communication styles, some people aren't 100% aware of what they actually are. So think about your behavior types as I share with you the styles of communication. You've got your aggressive communicator. Your aggressive communicator comes at you charging, and they're talking at you with a very loud, curt tone, and they're telling you exactly what it is they want from you, and they're demanding it of you. They're the aggressive type of communicator. The aggressive communicator doesn't want you to cut them off, and right now as they're speaking with you aggressively, they're acting toward you emotionally, not cognitively. And we're going to get into that style of communication in just a bit. But I'm sure we all know, and if I was in front of you all right now, if you could raise your hand, I bet a whole group of you would be able to tell me that you deal with aggressive communicators almost daily. Let's move on. The aggressive is pretty clear-cut, but I'd like to go ahead and move on to the assertive communicator. The assertive communicator is different than the aggressive communicator. And I'm going to share with you a story that will illustrate what it is an assertive communicator is all about. In a nutshell, the assertive communicator is passionate about what it is they are talking to you about. It's an important message from them. They feel it. So, for example, I, as a mediator, had a mediation conference with an HOA beautiful community in South Florida. The streets were impeccable. The landscaping was gorgeous. During the meeting, the issue at hand was one of the residents received notice after notice that he was violating the landscaping rules. This resident was a naturalist and a landscaper by profession, but liked the nature and the beauty of the natural flora to grow. And therefore, he didn't cut it back. He didn't follow the rules of the landscaping, and he was completely overgrown. During the mediation, we went and looked at the community on Google Earth, and you can see from above all the rooftops. The streets were impeccable, but his house, which was on a corner that had a fence around it, the fence was buckling onto the sidewalk because the hedges had grown and overgrown so much. You couldn't see the roof of his house from Google Earth from above, which really concerned me because being in South Florida, you get a hurricane, and I'm sure if anyone here is listening from South Carolina or along the eastern seaboard, the majority of us have been through this. I could just imagine that tree going in onto that roof and into that house. Also, I have to wonder, the foundation, what's happening to the foundation? What's growing in the walls? When I was talking in private, what we call caucus, to the homeowner, I said, you know, we're going to have to come to an agreement here. If you can cut this back, we can trim here. And his response to me was, I might as well kill myself if I have to do that. This was the assertive communicator. He's impassioned by his position. So when you typically think about an assertive communicator, it's one who is forthright. This is a person who's more passionate. Your passive communicator is the one that doesn't think that their voice is important, that you don't want to hear them. If you're in a board meeting and a direct question is asked to someone who is a passive communicator, they're not going to tell you what it is they're thinking because they truly don't think that their voice is important to be heard. The passive communicator not necessarily is, I'm sure you're probably thinking, oh, the lamb is a passive communicator because the lamb goes with the flow. In part, yes, but it doesn't always have to match a behavior type. So your passive communicator, when you're talking with a resident that you have an issue with, or their committee members are having issues and someone's just not speaking up, I encourage you next time to think, oh, this is a passive communicator. They don't think that their voice needs to be heard. Now, we're going to touch on passive-aggressive, and this goes back to Barbie's question about, is someone who is a backstabber a chameleon? So the passive-aggressive, again, the passive part of that communication style is they don't think their voice needs to be heard. While you're speaking with them, they're looking at you and they're listening, and they might be shaking their head yes, and saying and agreeing with you, and then as soon as you walk away, they're stabbing you in the back. You put that image in your head where the knife is wielding and your back is turned, and that's what they're doing to you. The passive-aggressive is the person who will listen to what you have to say and then go to their board or their committee members and completely disagree with what they told you they agreed with. So this is the passive-aggressive communicator. So my question to you here is, think about what your style is. Think about the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. Why is it that when someone approaches you, they're always angry at you? Why is it that when you approach someone, you always feel that sense of anger? These all come together by understanding behavior types and communication styles. So I'd like to ask you, think about that person. why is it that this happens? What is my, meaning your, typical behavior type with them? How do you communicate with others? And when you're figuring that out, adjust the way you interact with them, having now learned that, oh, this is someone I have to be gentler with. This person is more of a lamb. So I will adjust my behavior with them. Instead of roaring at them, I'll be kinder with them. I can take on that influencer role. I can put on my critical thinking cap because I have to approach them in a different manner that they'll be amenable to. When you're dealing with people who are speaking to you in an aggressive tone, we're going to go into, after our cultural diversity, an active listening discussion. Shari, would you want to go here to any questions regarding behavior types and communication styles?
Well, we've got the question and answer at the end as well, so we can continue on.
Okay, very good. So now we're going to move on to the other cultures and diversity that I brought up before. And I bring this up because, as you know, CAI is international. Whether it be at conferences or if whomever is sent to interact with those communities overseas, and of course including Canada, we have to be aware of how we behave and communicate in other cultures. And we do this because this is part and parcel of diffusing and understanding people. And we will do the difficult person part, but I have to stress this because it's all part and parcel of understanding how to deal with difficult people. So in the UAE, communication styles, and I'll just preface this across the board, typically in all cultures, politeness is key. In the UAE, small talk makes for a comfortable environment and familiarity. So if you're dealing in business, and bring this over here to you where you are now, because these cultures can be in your community. These can be the people that you're having issues with. I'm not singling out one. I'm just sharing that with different cultures or with whom you're speaking, you will have to adjust your behavior and your style of communication to avoid any conflict with them. So in the UAE, as I said, small talk is more comfortable. They typically like to be more familiar, more so than the Western end of it all. Eye contact is important when you're dealing with someone. They will ask you, hey, how is your family? Get to know you a little bit before jumping into business. Conversely, when I am in a city like New York conducting business or Chicago, those business interactions tend to be more formal, whereas if I'm in the South, business interactions do seem more familiar. So although I'm focusing on other cultures here and diversity, you can bring them home. Different from here with eye contact under the UAE column, you can be overseas in the UAE or you can be here, but eye contact is something that you want to be mindful of when dealing with someone from the Asian countries. So my advice here to you is always take a little time, do a little research, figure out and learn about what other cultures, what behavior, and what communication styles are acceptable. I went ahead and I included South Africa as well because South Africans, different from the UAE, tend to be more transactional. As you can see that I put here on the right side of the slide, cultural background has a strong influence because there are diverse backgrounds there. But overall, interpersonal relationships do rank high. But you establish them before becoming too familiar with them. So in South Africa, a little bit more transactional, a little bit less familiar until the comfort level there is created. So let's talk about how we deal with difficult people. Let's get to the nitty-gritty of it all and jump right into that. So here we go. This is the part that everybody always wants to know. Jill, give me the answer. Tell me how to diffuse an angry person. What do I do? We're going to go through these items step by step. And if you've printed out the PDF that accompanies this, I urge you to take that out and take notes as we go through it. I hope you've been doing so with the page that includes communication styles as well as the behavior types. So the first thing, a person is coming at you and they're angry and they're flailing their hands and they're telling you, hey, listen, every time I walk out of my house, the sprinklers are on, the water gets all over my feet, my shoes, my dress if I'm wearing one going to work, my slacks. I'm wet. I get into my car wet. We have an irrigation issue. This is a common element that you're taking care of, and you need to go ahead and fix this for me. So we're going to use this example as we move into diffusing difficult people. So their tone and body language is aggressive, and you could see them coming. They're red in the face. They're yelling at you. They're bloviating. What do? The first thing that I always urge my property managers that I'm speaking with is, remember, you are the professional. You are the property manager. You are representing your company, and you need to maintain that level of professionalism. What's the next thing we do? We don't want to profile or reflect exactly what they're doing. So we need to check our bodies. Do you, when someone's coming at you, what is your habit? What is your habit? Do you cross your arms? Do you sit behind your desk with your arms crossed on the table or across your chest? Do you stand up and put your hands on your hips or around your waist? Do you roll your eyes? Do you turn away? Do you clench up? I'm asking you these questions for a reason, because when you respond in kind with your body language, you can further incite this angry person, this difficult person. So we want to check ourselves. Another thing is, before we respond to someone, and I'm assuming you all are on mute here with me, but take a moment. I'm going to give you one exercise that you can do, and as I speak about it. We cannot speak when we swallow. We cannot speak when we swallow. So take a moment and try that exercise for a minute. Taking the minute to swallow allows you pause, so you don't have to respond right away to their anger. It gives you time to step back. I don't mean to make too light of this here, but when somebody had once told me, and I shared this in a seminar because I actually heard it in a seminar, that you could play a song in your head, and one of the popular ones was din din diddle diddle din din din, because they were thinking, okay, here's this person, they're from the circus, they're acting crazy. We all have one in our communities. So thinking of the song is fine, but you have to be careful because it's important to hear what they say. And again, I'm going to go into active listening. Let's go back to the sprinkler. And this is the third point. You have to remember, this is not about you. This person has a problem with the sprinkler head facing the wrong way. It's getting them wet. I all know we think highly of ourselves and what we know, but the sprinkler issue is not about you. And even if the difficult person is constantly coming to you because you didn't fix that sprinkler, or you didn't fix the asphalt in the road, or you didn't take care of the lighting, this is not about you really. It's about those issues. And these difficult people, again, as I stated at the beginning of the webinar, are emotional about these issues. They're not thinking about it. They're reacting emotionally because cognitively, all they would have to say to you if they weren't difficult people is, hey, property manager, my sprinkler is facing my sidewalk. When I walk out of my door every day, I get soaking wet. Can you fix that for me? So it is not about you. If they're yelling, when they come to you and they're yelling and they're screaming, after you check your body position, and I apologize, I'm going to step back for 1 second here. I know I mentioned about not crossing your arms, not placing your hands on your hips. One thing that I do to keep my body language in check and to show someone that I'm open to them is I put the tips of my fingers together in front of me about midway down my stomach. And this allows them to see that I am receptive to what they're saying and I'm not tensing up. This keeps me loose and listening. When someone comes at you and they're difficult and they're angry and they're screaming at you and they're telling you that they're getting soaking wet every day, you don't want to respond to them with, I can't hear you when you're screaming at me, because that will further incite them. Or if you say, if you just lower your voice and let me, you're saying too much, this just further incites them. So our goal is to tone them down. So the first thing is, and this is a really good point that helps a lot and people come away with, to say to that person, what you have to say is important to me. What you have to say is important to me. And you want to be able to hear what they're saying. So you're going to ask questions. When you say to someone what you have to say is important to me, and you ask them a direct question, or if you say you have many issues with what's going on in the property, let's take one at a time. Now, once you start asking questions, you're separating the emotion from the cognitive. And even if they continue to deliver those questions at you at machine gun speed, you can repeat to them what they've told you. And this goes to active listening, and I'm going to go into active listening just a bit more a little later. But this is important because now you're telling that difficult person, what you have to say is important to me, and I want to hear it. And when they start, whether you ask them a direct question or they just say to you, the sprinkler is getting me wet every morning and I need it fixed, to reiterate to that person, I understand the sprinkler is broken. Is that correct? And then they tell you, yes, that's correct. Even if they retort with it, yes, that's correct. I've been telling this to you and screaming at you now for 10 minutes. Yes, I want the sprinkler head fixed. But you've let them know you understand exactly what their issue is. If there are further questions that need to be asked, ask the questions. And then reiterate to them what it is they want. And let them know. And this also goes back to the lion behavior. If you can't get the irrigation company out to the issue within 48 hours, let that person know. I will contact the irrigation company. They typically respond in 48 hours. And I will be happy to be in touch with you. Keep in mind and write this down. Separate the emotional from the cognitive. Listen to what they have to say. Ask the questions that need to be asked and reiterate to them what it is they want. And then be flexible. I speak to managers on occasion who will say anything to shut up the resident who's complaining to them, or who will just fight with the vendor because they can't get something done. Excuse me. These are unproductive methods. The way to deal with the difficult situation is to cognitively walk through it and use these tools to get through it. And I wrote here, consider the outcome. Consider the outcome. We have to remember that we live and work and spend the majority of our time in these communities. We walk past these people daily. If you're the property manager and you're on property, you're passing these people. If you're neighbors and you're walking a dog, you're greeting your neighbors in the street. Always consider the outcome, and what you want your outcome always to be is successful. So you want to fix it. You don't want the fight, you want the fix. I just want to touch a little bit more on active listening. Active listening is exactly what it says. You're not just hearing what someone says, you're listening to the words that are coming out of their mouth. They need you to engage with them, but we're not going to engage by reflecting their behavior. We're going to maintain our professionalism, take that swallow if we need to, play that song in our head, but while we're doing so, we need to be able to repeat and clarify exactly what it is that they're screaming about. So now we know if someone's coming at you and they're being difficult, we're going to go through those steps and use those few tools to assist us in diffusing that behavior. Now, I do know everybody wants a key phrase, something to say to just shut someone down, but that's not going to work. The foundation that I have discussed with you here today, the behavior, the communication styles, those come hand in hand. And importantly, to go ahead and use the tools that we discussed. And we could review them in a few minutes after we take some questions, Shari.
All right, we can do that. We'll have another question and answer session coming up at the end. We do have, what is the best way to deal with controlling, aggressive, condescending committee member? That's,
I saw this earlier from Christina. Okay. Controlling, aggressive, condescending committee member. So, Christina, when you're dealing with this person, from what I'm gleaning from your question, we've got a high D, a high dominant, aggressive with the way they speak to you and they're putting you down. So what I would do with that person is, remember, you cannot be submissive in the presence of this person, but you don't want to further incite. So taking the time, digesting what they're saying, and responding to them by letting them know that you hear what they're saying, you would appreciate if they would not use whatever those condescending words are with them, but let them know that you hear what they're saying. You need to defend yourself, of course, in part, but you want to diffuse that aggression and that condescension. If you repeat back to them and let them know what you have to say is important to me, glean from them that information, and then go from there. So you're deflecting that attitude away from you. And remember, unfortunately, I can't ask you exactly for an exact sample of what they've said. I would love that opportunity. But if you want, you can, I know at the end of this webinar, you can reach out to me and I can respond to you more in depth, because we have to take each of these scenarios one by one. And I'd love to know what that person is saying to you in order to respond to that question more specifically. But I would say, size them up. Excuse me. Swallow. Take a moment. Don't respond to their condescension and their aggression. You maintain your professionalism and lay the boundaries with them. But in this case, it seems to me you're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive with your opinion as well, or what you have to say to them and how to respond to them without further inciting them. I hope that's helpful.
All right.
Shari?
Yes, we have another question. Anthony from Downers Grove, Illinois asks, how do you get the passive person to speak?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question, because you're extrapolating information from someone who doesn't want to share it with you. It's best not to ask their opinion. It would be better for you to ask more direct questions of them. So if the question is, we want to change the accessibility hours to the pool. The question to that passive person would be, what time do you think we should allow access to the pool? 6 a.m. or 7 a.m.? And this way they'll respond. And again, I know it sounds so simple, but even when you're diffusing the difficult person, to say to someone, and it sounds so simple to say, well, what you have to say is important to me, that's always helpful. That passive person will now be told, hey, whatever comes out of your mouth is important to me, and I do want to hear from you. Now, mind you, you can't make everyone, you can't change anyone. So if they're going to behave in this manner, then you have to accept that and know that you're not going to get the information you're seeking from them.
All right, Kim asks, how do you respond to, I pay common charges and you work for me?
Oh, well, that's another really good question. The response to that would be, and again, Kim, I don't know what your personality and behavior type is like, but it's important to let them know I'm working in your best interest, and extrapolate exactly what it is that issue is that they're saying, hey, you're working for me. You can also say, again, going back to professionalism, I am working here on behalf of your community, but I do work for ABC Property Management. And again, going back to what is it that their issue is all about? We need to get down to the nitty-gritty, and once we have that answer, we can address that. So if this person's saying to you, you work for me, well, what is it that they're asking for? Because we'll just go back to that issue with the sprinkler. What does you having to quote-unquote work for them have anything to do with that sprinkler? Nothing. So redirect and get to the nitty-gritty of the issue, the sprinkler.
And it looks like Christina has sort of a follow-up question. What do you say when it is out of your hands, when the HOA has no influence and authority and the owner says, you work for me?
I'm sorry, repeat the question one more time to me.
Christina asked, good question. What do you say when it is out of your hands? And that's referring to Kim's question. The HOA has no influence or authority, and the owner says, you work for me.
Well, that's interesting that they're circumventing the HOA, and I think this goes to a good point, what we asked in the poll question about do residents understand the difference between the board and the property manager and what their role is? And I think that's important to put on your agenda at some point, to put in a newsletter or to put on your website to help the residents further understand exactly what those positions are so they don't ask that question of you. And if it just goes to this person who's constantly, Christina, difficult with you, a little lesson in the distinguishing factors between the two would be important. And again, you have to take the time to consider how to craft this. And I don't know your exact scenario, but I urge you all to make sure that your residents do understand those distinguishing factors and think about how you're going to respond to them, what your role is. And not only that, but to help that person based on their behavior and the way they communicate with you, how you're going to deliver that message. And so, again, I'd love to hear more about it from you, but I would go with educating them, of course. And that's part and parcel of dealing with difficult people. They don't know sometimes what they're angry about. They don't, again, they're driven emotionally. Maybe that person is pushing a power play on you because they're telling you that you work for them when clearly you don't. So you've got this aggressive person who is telling you this, and you've got to arrange those words and your delivery to diffuse them so that they stop asking you that question.
All right. We have Diana Murray says, can you speak quickly to situations with aggressive supervisors and work relationships?
Oh, this is a really good question. Oftentimes when I'm speaking in front of an audience, I will get that from other property managers. Aggressive supervisors are difficult to deal with often because you've got that level of authority that you have to deal with. You can't make the difficult person, you can't change people. Even though we know now we've got some of these tools to diffuse the situations, you can't change who you are. So the direction you go into is, all right, what kind of behavior do I have from this supervisor? How do I adjust the way I interact with them to alleviate that aggression? So if you are more of a passive person, Diana, you're going to have to amp up your game a little bit. If you are more of a lamb, and that's okay, but you might have to incorporate a little lion into the way you respond. If this person is aggressive, I'm wondering if this person is more like a lion. I'd be interested to know if you would size up that supervisor like that. I know when we figure out or learn someone's behavior and the way they communicate and adjust ours, the way we behave and communicate with them, maybe when you're in the presence of that supervisor, they find you, and I say this with all due respect, obviously I don't know you, cringing, or they might see you slouching your arms, and they see that their power play over you is working, so they continue to do it. And therefore, you continue to feel that this person is aggressive to you all the time. Well, let's shake that up a little bit. Guess what? Diana has a stronger backbone than you think she does and will voice her opinion. And you might find that that aggression will dial down a little bit because now they're saying, I've got somebody stronger here than I gave her credit for. And that goes, again, to your body language and the way you respond to them. So take a moment, and I hesitate to use this word, but size up those people. Really think about the things that we talked about today in behavior and communication, and think about how you can alter that in the workplace and with your residents.
All right. Lori Albert, you may have answered part of this earlier, but a cultural question. How do you encourage participation from a homeowner who does not want to engage in the operation of the association, such as Canadians that do not want to tattle on each other?
Isn't that amazing, Lori, that you picked out Canadians who don't want to tattle on each other? You can't bring the horse to, you can bring the horse to water, but you can't make him drink, so to say. So if people are not engaging, again, I would say I don't read what you're saying as they're being difficult. They're just not engaging or getting involved. Then they're not going to be involved. But if you educate them and give them the information to bring them into the association, and you can diffuse this tattle on each other that anything is said confidentially, or what is said between us is between us. Let them know that, again, you're a professional person, so tattling I don't find very professional. I highly doubt that you would be doing that. I hope that goes to your question.
And for a final question, Deborah asks, how do you deal with new board members who are all working independently and cannot agree on any decisions or issues?
Does not happen often. Take the information that I shared with you today. They're all working independently. How do we get them to work together? So think about who is the person on the board who is your lion. Key point here. Who is your owl? Who is your critical thinker? Who has all the detailed, correct information that can deliver that to those other members who aren't cooperating? Somebody can turn away and say, I'm not buying that. I'm not doing it. but the rules speak for themselves. So utilize what you know in terms of their behavior and how you can pull from them those qualities that can move that forward and bring them together. And you can do that by flattery. You can say to a board member, I know you understand the rules. I need you, or I would ask of you to impart upon everyone else what those rules are, because you've got it down pat. You flatter them by building up what their strengths are. And as I said a couple of times throughout this webinar, there's no wrong behavior or communication style, and there's no right one. So tap into the ones that you can now see and use that to your advantage to have them work better with each other.
And with that, we're going to go to some final comments by our presenter.
Thank you, Shari, and thank you everyone so much for your great questions. I really enjoy doing this. I wish I could do it right in front of you because I love being interactive, but nonetheless, you received all the talking points of dealing with difficult people. Communication strategies, that is the key word in this program. I want to share with you that I recently read in Community Manager magazine, the July-August issue, there was an article on conversation caution, and this speaks directly to what we've been talking about. As you can see here on this slide, I've got some points that cover what has been covered here today, but the one thing I really want to drive home to you is positivity goes farther than derision, so be kind with your words. And I brought that conversation caution article up to you because it discusses exactly how you should use words and the use or the abuse of words that don't need to be used and those that do need. So if you've got Community Manager magazine July-August issue, take a look at it on page 9. And it's important. We have to choose our words wisely. And that goes to what we talked about, understanding the behavior and the communication. That's how we talk to someone. The listener who brought up before extrapolating information from the passive person, choose your words with that person so they find comfort in what it is you're asking of them, and within that comfort, then they can respond to you. Your goal, always your goal, is to create a productive dialogue. Productive dialogue. You've got to diffuse that angry person, get to the point of the issue, utilizing the tools that we talked about so that you can effectively communicate with them. I do want to just add one more thing. At the bottom of the screen, Shari, I don't see it, but I think Shari put it up in your resource section, in your web resources. There is a fantastic video. It's a news clip, came out of South Florida, of a 55-plus community where the board has gone absolutely rogue. The board, there's nepotism amongst the board. They don't let any of the residents speak at meetings, and they literally come to fisticuffs during their board meetings. People are fighting, hitting each other. It's amazing, and I strongly urge you to take the few minutes to view it. I do know that Shari, as I said, put it here as web resources, but if you have your pen in hand, you can just write down the following: Channel 10 News, Tamarac, Tamarac, community violence. And that will come up in your Google search, and it's amazing what goes on there. And I'd be interested to hear from anybody if you've ever actually experienced this. It's unfortunate, but talk about difficult people, take a look at that video. Thank you so much.
And with that, we need to conclude our